Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow. With me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, and on TikTok. Folks, please send in your greetings. Please tell us where you are watching from, and please send in your comments and your questions on this great British warm summer evening. And we've got a packed show for you as always, and we're looking forward to speaking with our guest at the bottom of the hour at 7:30. And that is a show favourite, namely Luca Johnson, who's going to be coming on, and he's going to be giving us his opinions about Tier Keir. There's Luca there, a fine young thinker in the patriotic field. Delighted to have Luca on and delighted to be hearing from him. That's at 7:30. Now, if you're watching on TikTok, folks, you won't see that. You'd have to go to our youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Welcome to everybody there. Somebody's saying that there's something tonight in George Square. We don't know anything about that, not been informed of that, but no doubt if you're not there, please at least follow us on our TikTok and follow us on YouTube, because we do need our subscribers on YouTube. We need to have many, many more subscribers than we do. We recently just hit 3,900 on YouTube, but that's after well over 1,000 videos and almost 14 years now, I think, of being on YouTube. So we got put on the slow lane, definitely, on YouTube, regardless of the quality of our content. So please do subscribe to us if you can, and click the thumbs up button. That really helps the algorithm. Similarly, on X, give us a retweet, folks. Let's get this message out, because tonight we're going to be talking about the quite, I think, sensational news that Humza Yousaf is considering fleeing. He is considering fleeing Scotland. And basically, that's a big issue. I mean, this guy was the First Minister of Scotland. He reached the top political position in Scotland. And he liked to tell us that he was basically the Pakistani William Wallace of Scotland. And now, a few months later, after no longer being the leader of the First Minister of Scotland, he's now thinking about fleeing the country. Fleeing the country. That's a strange mentality, I have to say. It's a very unusual mentality. And here is, for example, the Sun. Humza, I may flee the West. Okay, so the good news is, if you're in France or Germany or maybe even Italy, he's not going to be fleeing to your country. So you're saved there, because it's the West. And we'll show in a minute, we'll show the actual interview with him. It lasts only for a minute, but he does say that he is wondering about his future now in Scotland and the United Kingdom, indeed Europe and the West. Now, the record goes with just simply fleeing Scotland. So that's bad news if you live in Northern Ireland or Wales or England, because he might be going to flee to you. So I fear family will be forced to flee Scotland. Remember, this is the former First Minister, Humza Yousaf. Now, speaking personally, if I had been elected First Minister of Scotland, I would consider my loyalty was actually to Scotland. In fact, I haven't even been elected into public office, and my first loyalty is actually to Scotland. So it's weird when you think about it that the former First Minister appears to have no loyalty to the nation of which he was misgovering for too many months. Now let's play the short video just so you know what I'm talking about. And he's doing what he does very well, which is, you could call it cry baby, or you could call it cry bully. It's like, poor old me, poor old me. And it's intended to kind of bully you into feeling sympathy for him. But he does let slip that he's going to flee the nation if things don't work out his way. Let's line that clip up and play it right now.
What has the last week felt like?
It's felt utterly horrendous. It is a strange feeling, John, when your very sense of belonging is questioned. Look, I'm, as you've said in the introduction, I'm about as Scottish as they come. Born in Scotland, raised in Scotland, educated in Scotland, just welcomed my third child here in Scotland, was a leader of the Scottish Government for just over a year, leader of the Scottish National Party. You cut me open and I'm about as Scottish as you come. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know whether the future for me and my wife and my three children is going to be here in Scotland or the United Kingdom, or indeed in Europe and the West, because I have for some time really worried about the rise of Islamophobia. I wrote a column about it actually just about a month ago, the rise of the far right driven by Islamophobia in Europe, UK, and the West. And we are now seeing the culmination of not years, actually, decades of anti-migrant, anti-Muslim rhetoric being normalized in the political discourse, now playing out in the most horrendous, violent way possible. And that genuinely makes me question whether or not my family has an existence here in the UK or not. And by the way, I'm not the only one. I've had hundreds of messages from the Muslim community saying the exact same thing.
You have to hand it to Humza. He is fantastic entertainment. He really does deliver the content. You know, we thought we had seen the last of him back when he stepped down, but no, he's still there. He's still there. He's making it all about him and delivering the entertainment value, cranked up to 11. He really is something. But listen to that. He goes, "I'm as Scottish as they come. Oh, but by the way, I might actually just get the hell out of Scotland with me and my family." And apparently there's hundreds of others, if you believe that, who are going to do the same thing. So no, actually, Humza, that's not as Scottish as they come. Because if you were as Scottish as they come, you might actually do the Robert the Bruce William Wallace Act and actually stay in Scotland and actually stay here and, you know, speak up for the country. But no, he is by his own words, he's contradicting himself, because I'm as Scottish as they come. Okay, I'm in here to the end, to the bitter end, defending my country. But clearly, Humza, like many other people, has other countries that he can move to if he chooses. And that's not an option for me. And that's not an option for most people in the United Kingdom, because for most people in the United Kingdom, this is the only country we have. This is the only home we have. This is the place where we're going to end up in our last days. We don't have other countries. We're not global nomads. We don't decide just to go back to, you know, wherever it is that your rest of your family lives. We don't have other countries to so-called flee to. And the British tend not to do that. You know, they tend not to flee when the time gets hard. They stay and they make the best of it. And that's what we urge everybody who is a patriot to do, regardless of how bad you think the country may be going. It can be just as bad elsewhere. So don't leave. We need you here to stand up for our great nation of the United Kingdom. So, but it is interesting that fleeing for Humza is now an option. And well, yesterday, 2 days ago, 48 hours ago, that wasn't an option I would ever have credited him with considering, but clearly he is considering now. And I think that's actually quite telling of loyalties. Anyway, maybe he could go back to Pakistan and claim asylum seeker status there, and no doubt be granted it very quickly. Anyway, enough about Humza. We might be talking about him again when we speak to our guest at the bottom of the hour, which is Luca Johnson from Amiable Arguments. And stick around for that, folks. Now let's look at some of the comments. Got a lot of comments coming in here. That's fantastic. Send in your comments. Who's first in tonight? Who's first in? Who's first in? I think it was our man Derek. Oh, no, it was Debbie. Good evening. I wish Starmer would listen to the British people. We have been silent for far too long. No need for violence, though. Well, obviously, that's for sure. Derek Hart says, good evening, fellow unionists. Like Debbie mentioned, no need for breaking the law, but do you blame the people? We can't take any more migrants, costing us $6 billion a day. Yet the UK government is happy to stop the winter payments. Indeed it is. And what I don't understand is, why can't we just pay the small boat arrivals to go back? You know, we're paying for them by putting them up in hotels. We're going to pay for them if they get dispersed around the UK. Why can't we just give them a grant to go home? But that has to be part of a policy that says no more of you are allowed to come in, which would be part of a policy of actually blocking the channel, which we'll get to in a minute. Hello to TC. Good evening to you, sir. And to Alan. And Saul echoes what a lot of us are saying. Can we pay for Humza's ticket? Well, indeed, if he has a farewell party, I do hope that he invites you and I, because it would be good to go along and just, shake his hand and say, well, all the best, mate. Hope you have a new life in your in the old country. Whoa, thank you to DTube, who has sent in a super chat for £5. AFFG, always saying it how it is. Do you believe two-tier policing is a genuine threat to Scotland and the UK? Yes, absolutely, DTube. It is a genuine threat. We'll be talking about that with our guest at 7:30, but there's also more than just two-tier policing. It's two-tier policing as a consequence of two-tier thinking and two-tier political rhetoric. Because when we remember Keir Starmer during the summer of 2020, when there was the so-called Black Lives Matter riot, so it was all about racism, colonialism, imperialism, etc., etc. He could figure out lots of different excuses for that. But this time with the riots in England, he's not looking to see what are these people upset about, what are they angry about. He's not even considering any of that, So thank you very much to DTube for the £5 super chat. Folks, you can see the little, if you're on YouTube, you see the little $sign. That's the super chat button, which DTube has taken advantage of. Persephone says, bye-bye, useless. I've got a problem with my mouse. It's because of our new setup here. Let me see if I can get it working over here. Hello to Gypsy Geek Freak. Good to see you too, sir. And to Scotland Scorpion. Debbie says she's looking at the George Square webcam and she does not see anything there. I have not heard of anything, to be frank with you, Debbie. Derek from Armadale, how you doing? And Eric says that he'll pay for his ticket anywhere he wants, so long as it's coach class. Indeed. Tychus is skeptical about whether he will actually go back. Catherine says that she has an option to go, but she's staying in Scotland. And that's probably because Humza knows that we're his bread and butter, says Tommy Scott. Lots of comments. Can't read them all out, I'm afraid. Hi to Oksana. Joyce says that his father made sure they had a Pakistan passport. It's interesting. I don't know for sure what his status is on that sort of thing, or how people do get back there. Daniel says the elites are not going to stop the £3 an hour cheap labour so that they've grown to love since Tony Blair. Indeed. Well, the people who should stop things are the politicians. And we're very clear on this, that it's the politicians that are to blame for what goes wrong. We can't be blaming the immigrants as such. We have to blame the politicians because they make the laws that cause these things to happen, and they are the ones who can change things. And this was brought home to me when I was reading The National, which I read so that you don't have to. I was reading it yesterday, and Stephen Flynn, remember him? Stephen Flynn takes aim at fascists and racists. Now, this is to do with, well, the riots in England. In a thread posted on X, Flynn said the fascist, racists and Islamophobes dragging their knuckles through some parts of England and Northern Ireland do not have any legitimate concerns, close quote. Firstly, you do see this among a certain type of politician, often on the left, is they'll really punch down on the working class. On one side of their mouth, they'll say how they support the working class. On the other side of their mouth, they'll really be nasty about the working class that they don't like. You see it right across the board. And Flynn there going on about the knuckle draggers. Now, we at A Force for Good would never talk in a dehumanizing way about any kind of person, regardless of their class or race or color. But a lot of these politicians have no qualms about doing that. Anyway, so he's saying they've got no legitimate concerns. And their world is full of hate. So in other words, if you went out to express outrage and to express anger about 3 children being murdered, then that's just your world is of hate. So they're rebranding. I saw somebody on Twitter saying they're rebranding legitimate outrage and legitimate anger as racism and hate and quote unquote fascism and so on and so forth. They're rebranding that legitimate anger because these people, many of them, do, to the extent that they're aware of them, they do have legitimate concerns. And that concerns the absolute transformation of their country on a daily basis, and especially the absolute transformation through the country being openly, visibly invaded by small boats across the channel, bringing hundreds of men daily now, hundreds of men of a certain age daily, flagrantly breaking into the country. And we have to witness that, the indignity of our country being invaded. You know, we're big on remembering and recalling to memory Britain's military history, the defense of these islands. And, you know, somebody once said, we must defend our islands, whatever the cost may be. That's to paraphrase, of course, Winston Churchill. And are we just to forget about that now? We've just got to sit back and let this happen. The indignity of that is incredible. The indignity of seeing the law being broken in that way, the indignity of seeing our country being invaded, that's a legitimate concern, Mr. Flynn. And it's utterly indefensible that you should imagine that should be allowed. It's indefensible. You have no position on that matter. You see, he goes on. Flynn continued regarding the rioters. I have full confidence that Keir Starmer will ensure that they face the full force of the law, and those who have stood on the thin blue line against them will receive the credit they so richly deserve. But what comes next is so important. And I'm like, oh, what comes next? Is he going to say, we really do need to sit down and have a debate about mass immigration, about people breaking into the country over the English Channel, and we need to address those concerns because breaking into the country is absolutely indefensible? Did he go on and say that? No. What he went on was to say, quote, for too long, many senior politicians have failed to argue in favor of our moral and legal responsibilities to those seeking asylum. No, we have no moral and legal responsibility to people who break into our country. If their first act in coming into our country is to break the law of entry, we have no moral or legal responsibilities to them. These people are criminals. We do not want these people to be integrated in society. We want to keep these people as far away from society as possible because these are criminals. They do not belong in this country. They must be sent back. Firstly, the boats must be stopped. They must be sent back, and there must be no resettlement of any of them in our United Kingdom. And if we had true leadership, if we were a serious country once again, if we had true national patriotic leaders, this would be just considered a matter of common sense. It was a matter of common sense during World War II. It was a matter of common sense right up until about 2018, when these boats started to arrive. A few hundred a year. We were noticing them and we were drawing attention to it back then. Like, this is a flagrant breach of our sovereignty. What's the government doing about it? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. What they need to do is they need to send Royal Navy patrol boats in to meet these dinghies. There needs to be Royal Marines on board. They need to lash the dinghies to the back of the motorboats. They need to drag them literally or force them in some way back into France. And it must be very clear, you don't get into our country at all. And if they took that strong attitude, then the passages of these boats would stop. Now, what would also happen? France is going to get upset about that. Too bad. We've been at war with France before. We don't need to go to war with them again, but we do need to stand up to them. We need to stand up for our own interests here in this country. Now, some politicians will say that if you did that, some people might drown in the Mallee. And that would be very unfortunate if that were to happen. But it wouldn't be happening all the time. Once it was clear that Britain was not going to accept this, then what you would find in the long term is that no dinghies would be drowning in their normal crossings, as some of them are doing occasionally now. You would actually be cutting back the numbers who drown in the process if you actually had a strict policy that no, your boats are not coming anywhere near our shores. And that's what needs to be done. And we need politicians of mettle to do that. We don't need your Stephen Flynns trying to make up indefensible arguments about morality and legality. The small boat invasion is utterly indefensible. And this must become the talking points going into the English council elections in 2025 and the Scottish elections in 2026. And if you are a politician or standing for a political party and you are prepared to continue the small boat invasion, then you cannot be considered a legitimate candidate. So we have to change that political debate. We have to move the political debate in such a way that nobody will defend the small boat invasion and that there becomes a movement to stop it and to send them back and to ensure that none of them are resettled in the rest of the United Kingdom because they don't belong here. They're criminal people who should not be here. I'm speaking specifically about this people on the small boats. They should not be allowed to resettle in the United Kingdom. And we must do what it takes to send them back, including giving them money to get them out, including giving them money for their airfare, including whatever it takes. And if you can't leave, then you're just going to have to spend time in prison, 10 years in prison. Why not? And then you watch them leave. Then you'll watch them leave. So you have to do this. And it's going to take, because what's the alternative? The alternative is just like watching your country be destroyed. And is Keir Starmer intending to do that? Are the politicians in Westminster intending to do that? Or are they going to make a break and say, yeah, we've got to get this under control. This is a national emergency. And then after we've dealt with the small boats, that will have an impact upon the wider debate of legal immigration, which is also far too high, of course, but that is a different issue from the small boat invasion. It's the small boat invasion, which is the absolute indignity that we should never have to suffer if we are a sovereign nation. Paul says here, in a normal, self-respecting country, the boats issue would never have emerged. It would never have occurred to normal people that someone should enter a country without a passport. And of course, the thing could get worse as well, as Callum here suggests. If, God forbid, there was a war with Iran, then we know that Middle Eastern wars, the only thing that Britain gets from that is just more and more refugees, in fact, endless refugees. So that's one reason that we have to hope that there is no war in the Middle East, because that won't end well for us. The Laird of Kilbarchan says the government class refuses to differentiate between us tax chattel and our invaders. What's Alan saying here? Because of the European Convention on Human Rights, why aren't we pushing for the law to be fully implemented and that the first safe country must accept them? That's the theory with asylum, is that the first safe country should accept them. And yes, we should push for that. 2020, says the Laird, onwards proved that we are collectively spineless. Well, I think I know what you mean. But no people rise except through leadership. And the system was always trying to take out the leaders so that the people can always be kept in disgruntlement and confusion. Okay, it's the bottom of the hour. I see that our man Luca is in the house. Now, Luca and I are going to speak about two-tier policing, and especially Tier Keir, the man of the moment. So please say hello to Luca.
Evening.
Good evening, Luca. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, people watching on TikTok won't be able to see this interview, but you can check us out by going to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good if you want to see this cracking interview with Luca. Now, Luca, I know you were on about a month ago. Since then, we've had the general election, and it just seems to have been like endless news. And it's really quite a remarkable first 4 weeks for Keir Starmer, or what everybody starts calling now two-tier Keir. What's your thoughts on the first few weeks of Starmer's premiership?
Well, the first thing to mention, of course, is that although two-tier Keir and two-tier policing is self-evidently a policy that the Labour Party are pursuing, we can't forget that they are really only operating off of the groundwork that has already been laid over several decades now by the uniparty as a whole. Keir Starmer's speech when the first horrendous attack obviously happened in Southport. Keir Starmer's speech at the time would have been absolutely no different if it would have been given by Rishi Sunak or anyone from the Green Party or the Lib Dems, right? The messaging of the what we're really seeing before our eyes quite rapidly since that horrendous event is the breakdown of the party messaging, which is just crumbling in large part to X and social media, and even Musk himself basically declaring war on Keir Starmer. Elon Musk himself tweeting out hashtag two-tier Keir, which to devastating effect.
Yes, it's an amazingly clever little rhyme, that. And do you believe that there is such a thing as two-tier policing? I mentioned earlier there's also two-tier thinking on these particular matters, but let's deal with the policing for the moment. What's your thoughts on that, bearing in mind that, no doubt there's a limit to what we can say here on YouTube without getting a knock on the door?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I would actually... Yes. Oh, no. The first thing that I would mention is actually just the fact that this might seem a bit off topic, but obviously we've had a lot of sort of foreign conflicts recently with Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, and whichever side you sort of fall on with those two particular conflicts, what can't be denied is that even though these are conflicts that are happening far, far away from you, you are morally compelled to feel as strongly and as angry as possible about these distant, far-off injustices. But on the domestic front, as soon as it comes to you and your own people in your own country, then you're not supposed to get angry at all. You're not supposed to get emotional. You're supposed to just let the latest outrage pass over you, just like all of the others before it, like 7/7, like the Manchester Arena bombing, like just an entire catalogue of moral affronts to the safety and integrity of the people of this nation that, frankly, should never have been something they should have to have contended with in their daily lives in the first place, because they never asked for mass immigration. But the answer as to whether or not there is two-tier policing in society is self-evidently yes. You touched on earlier about BLM in 2020. Let's not forget that the BLM movement had already murdered several people over in America by the time it had come over to Britain, and they defaced Churchill's statue, they set fire to a cenotaph, and the police bent the knee to these people. They've allowed Nazi salutes to go by from the Palestinian mob in London almost every week, with and obviously what they did up the side of Big Ben, because really it's a numbers game. They know that these minoritarian groups, the police that is, don't accept their moral authority and exist outside of their jurisdiction. And the police fundamentally don't have the numbers to go after these now sizable but strong communities that we've allowed to foster in our society through negligence.
That's a very good way of putting it, that they don't accept the moral authority of the police. And as you also said, there's a question of numbers, in that certainly in the centre of London these days, the white population is the minority. And it's kind of ridiculous really to talk about ethnic minorities now as if you mean people who are not white, because it's the whites in some of these places that are the ethnic minority. And when I was growing up, I always knew that. I was like, why do they talk about the whites as the majority? Because I spent time in Libya when I was younger. I lived there for 3 or 4 years. I say I lived there. My parents took me there. I was like 6 at the time. But they, like, you were a white person, very much a minority. So I always just kind of believed that the world was like largely non-white anyway. And so when we came back to Britain, and by the time of the 1980s came around, everybody's talking about ethnic minorities. I just presumed they must mean the white people, because we are the white minority in the world. But it was actually, no, apparently those people who are the minority. And I'm like, no, they're the majority. They always have been in the world. So it's ridiculous that phrase is used at all. But yes, it's, as I touched on there, we're also facing two-tier thinking, not just two-tier policing. And that's a huge part of it as well. The idea that that any kind of bad behavior is somehow justified by, well, you name it, you know, imperialism, colonialism, something that people did 300 years ago, you know, as if, well, maybe what's relevant is what's happening right now, not what happened 300 years ago.
Yes.
So.
Well, if I may, on that point, it's I find it remarkable because you always constantly hear this idea that, well, first of all, it's always the far right, right? It's not just normal people feeling threatened or any sort. There's no drive, as you say, from the government to get to the root source of what's bringing people to do this. Even though, again, with two-tier policing, there is always some sort of scapegoat reason to justify the illicit behavior of minority groups and minority riots and things like that. But you're always accused of being divisive and sowing division and hate. But as we've seen only this past week with Ireland, you've literally got one of the most inexplicable sources of unity I've ever seen, with Irish Republicans, and obviously, you know, Unionists, Catholics and Protestants all locking arms, singing Kumbaya, because they realize the existential threat of mass immigration against them. People can intuitively, they can intuit when someone means them well or not, right? Because as we know, there are many people who are minorities in this country who have assimilated very, very well. And you go to the pub with them, you have a beer with them, but there is also another type, and it is a more ghettoized type, a more radical type. And people can tell the difference, right? People aren't stupid. And that's the problem. The government is fundamentally at war with human nature itself, trying to police multiculturalism. Far from being a utopia, seems to demand the most authoritarian jackboot in order for it to succeed. But we never needed such authoritarianism before multiculturalism, so that would speak to its demerits as a system of society, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like it's a form of, and I use the word religion. I don't mean that to knock religion as such, but it is a form of belief system that they are entirely behind. And you look at Keir Starmer; he is a self-confessed atheist, so he doesn't actually have a religion. So he doesn't have a connection, if you like, with God or anything. So his connection is his own brain, which is apparently the most clever brain in the world, and he's going to stand by whatever comes out of his mouth and his thinking, because, like, he's set himself up as literally the point of all existence, you know. And so he is going to be like that, you know. He's going to be like seriously authoritarian on that which gives his life meaning, which is the multicultural, quote unquote, religion. Just getting back to what you were talking about there with the Irish situation, in Scotland as well, I can see very easily a lot of so-called Scottish nationalists to date simply not going along with your Stephen Flynns of this world, because Stephen Flynn is just part of that kind of political elite class who absolutely again worship multiculturalism. But most people who vote for the SNP don't. And lots of people, perhaps the majority of people who have voted for the SNP, they don't want Scotland to be invaded either. They don't think it's right that people should come here illegally, that should be come here criminally, that they should take houses that their children or that they themselves need. And so I do believe that the SNP and all the political class are on a loser on this one. And they are going to be forced, and it will be extremely difficult for them to accept it, but they are going to be forced into understanding that their worldview isn't relevant anymore. So in a sense, this is a kind of last gasp. And over the next 5 years of the Starmer administration, it is going to be very interesting to see what happens. But we want to move the debate to the point where people like Stephen Flynn cannot speak up with his nonsense about how somehow the small boat arrivals need our moral and legal protection. No, they don't. They're criminals. They need to go home. That has to be the message. And I can see that message being well taken up by the majority of people in Scotland and throughout the United Kingdom. And your Stephen Flynns and and Keir Starmers of this world will have to change their tune or find another job. That's my hope anyway for the future.
Well, one of the things that I find so remarkable, one time I was unbearably naive, and back in 2016, and I was 20 at the time? Yeah, 20, and I voted to leave the EU, right? And one of the reasons to vote to leave the EU was because I bought into the whole idea that, look, if we can just scream hard enough about leaving the EU, about ending freedom of movement, then the government will finally get the message that we don't want mass immigration, right? And they didn't get that. But the thing was that, speaking to the Stephen Flynns and the Keir Starmers of the world, obviously I don't know about the political history of Stephen Flynn, but I would guess that he's an enormous EU, lovey and a huge Europhile and everything, hates Brexit. Yeah. But the thing is with the SNP and people like that, from, as you say, a very old and dying regime, they don't understand that, well, if they'd have just nipped the immigration issue in the bud there and then, sort of, around 2012, then we'd probably have never left the EU. We'd still be in the EU right now, right? So rather than preserve that political union, which apparently happened to them so much, and just realize the realpolitik of needing to have a bit of give and take, they wanted it all. And in their quest to have it all, they lost membership to the European Union. And now in their attempt to hold on to that one thing with their dying clutches, which is mass immigration, which they will not surrender. They're like that random Japanese guy in Malaysia who was fighting World War II 30 years after it had ended, right, in the jungle. It's like, no, you don't understand. It's over, right? The native consensus now is so far against you. I was looking at the YouGov polls today. Immigration has now become the biggest issue
really?
amongst British voters, or certainly English voters. But again, I don't think genuinely that the establishment have, again, the realpolitik skill to address the issue, because they would get called mean things by the true believers, and many of them themselves are true believers in the project. So, all right, then be brittle and break. What is it to me? You've caused us nothing but suffering.
Yeah, that's right. And the political class in Westminster and also in Scotland, they exist in a wider culture of non-governmental organizations and charities, and they're all incestuously related in one way or another, sometimes quite literally. I mean, Yvette Cooper was being interviewed by Ed Balls the other day, who's literally her husband, but and a lot of the NGOs as well, they're full of people who are doing extremely well for themselves as a consequence of the mass immigration agenda. I mean, refugee charities, legal firms, academic. PhD people, everybody's in on it, and it's all money, 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 doing very well. They can't see that. They can't see that golden calf, if that's the right word, being destroyed.
No, and as you say, it's not just because it's not just even two-tier policing, where we basically live in a two-tier society now with DIE agendas and equity policy, the Equality Act of 2010. The fact that the RAF, I know it's like from a year and a bit ago now, but the fact that the RAF put a pause on accepting English applicants in order to diversify. It's like, you absolute insert vulgar word here, right? Like back in the 1940s, it was the English who were up there fighting it, and you wouldn't be here now implementing your rotten agenda if it weren't for our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, right, from World War I onwards. And you have to basically punish their grandchildren for being born into a time in which we've become, it's reprehensible in absolutely every way.
It is reprehensible, and I think a good element of younger people as well are seeing that just naturally. They're seeing that that's not that, like some of us older people, we grew up where there was only one or two, the immigration was very little into the country, very few people into the country. And, we kind of would go along with some of the politically correct platitudes just for the sake of a quiet life, keep things together. Didn't really affect things. But now it's got to such a stage. There's so many basically foreign people in the country coming in every day as well. And you're seeing it on social media. And so the younger people are just not falling for politically correct platitudes anymore. It's like, well, I thought this was my country, and in a way, waking up in a way that older people, myself included, may not have done, in the past. But younger
the threat is
now.
Right, but we have to bear in mind as well that in the time of younger people, the threat has become more pronounced in a way that it wasn't, back when older people were growing up. And another thing as well is just to say that with every grasp, the state becomes more and more pronounced, and people can feel the boot of it being put down upon them. Only today I was seeing the reports from one of the police intendants that I've got a quote here actually. UK authorities suspect that foreign states may have used bot accounts to amplify anti-immigration sentiment. And this is something that you constantly get. It's never organic, right? It can never be just the organic feeling of the people. There's always some sort of interference, some sort of deflection. Well, to employ the Ayn Rand quote, you can argue with reality, but you can't argue with the consequences of ignoring reality, or something to that effect. It will catch up with you in the end, no matter how much you try to hide from it. But really, what we're seeing is, with the two-tier policing, is the most overt example of the sort of Schmittian sort of friend-enemy distinction, in which those in power offer incentives to their friends and punish their enemies. And we can see from examples of the police footage with them basically saying to the Muslim gangs, oh no, just go and quietly hand your weapons into the mosques, leave them there, come back, we won't arrest you and everything. And you compare that to the way that the English people are being dealt with, and it's obvious who power feels is its friend and who is its enemy. And basically the minority client states are their friends and we are their enemies in this situation.
Yes. As you say, it can never be organic. And to the extent that what it actually is spontaneous. You know, these law-breaking incidents, put it that way, are spontaneous. Nobody's organizing in any significant way those things. That's just young people on a summer night as well, which probably aids it a bit. Yet the media, the entire political class, will pretend that it is being, to quote the Times on Monday, the 8th of August, it's all about apparently instigators. And this is the Times, which is meant to be the paper of record. And it's talking about the so-called English Defence League and other extremists, largely, but not only, on the far right, blah, 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 blah. So it's talking about English Defence League as being one of the instigators here. Well, as we know, and as we said last week on our show, that's stopped over 10 years ago. Yet that's a paper that you're meant to take seriously, spreading a straightforward lie, because there is no group anymore called that. So why are they doing that? It's simply to get behind Keir Starmer's rhetoric about the so-called far right being behind it, when it's nothing of the kind. It's just mainly outraged people acting spontaneously, and others acting, you know, in a way that's going to get them in trouble with the law. So do not riot, always behave yourself, as it were. But let's at least acknowledge that there's no instigators there. There's no hidden hands or anything like that.
Well, there was no acceleration, was there, of trials and convictions for the rioters in Hare Hill in Leeds only 2 weeks ago. There was no press conference for that. There was no need to come out and warn the people of Leeds that they care about their safety so deeply, or any such thing. This is it sort of has this ongoing psychic messaging to it that eventually just sort of snaps something in people's heads, which is that these guys do not give a damn about me whatsoever. As far as they're concerned, I'm basically an inconvenience, right, to their utopia. And yeah, well, it's not going anywhere, because they're just recycling the same tried and failed tactics from 2010, 2012. This is just so ancient now. It didn't stop Trump. It didn't stop Boris. It didn't stop Brexit. It didn't stop Nigel Farage just becoming an MP in Parliament. It's not working. It's not working on the mainland continent of Europe with all of their leaders there, to the degree that Humza Yousaf couldn't possibly feel safe going to his beloved EU nations anymore. So, but they keep doing it because it's the only playbook they know, because fundamentally these are not smart people, frankly.
Well, that's a good point. Like Humza Yousaf has said that he's not sure that he can be safe in Europe or the West, but I thought he loved the European Union. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We must emphasize that. Surely the European Union is fantastic, is it not, Humza? Surely you can go there safely. Oh, but apparently not. Him and the hundreds of people who have contacted him don't think so. Yeah, but you also mentioned about you kind of alluded there to the message that the mayor of London put out. Was it yesterday or the night before, saying now's the time to just check in on your black and brown friends, just to check that they're okay. In London, he was saying that. Yes, did you check in on them just to check?
I did.
Okay?
I did. I sent some messages with some little kisses at the end, just to show that I really meant it. Yeah. Good. Well, at least I don't know to what extent a message from you would pacify them, but I'm sure it would. Yeah. Good. Well, look, it's 5 minutes to the top of the hour. It's been a good wee chat, and we have, I think we've expressed how a lot of people are feeling at the moment. And what we always say at A Force for Good is let's get some policies on the table. Our policy is stop the boats, send them back, no resettlement in
the UK, because in yesterday's Times, it says, plan to move asylum seekers into empty homes across Britain. Isn't that really just going to make things so much better?
You didn't want to get on the housing ladder, did you, young people? There's these illegal lawbreakers here who are front of the queue over you. Yeah, it's just more of the same.
That's right. And we have a moral and legal obligation to these guys that are breaking into the country, apparently, to give up our housing to them as well. Well, Mr. Stephen Flynn, Mr. Humza Yousaf, and the guy who's the mayor of London, what's his name?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, does it? Yeah.
Sadiq Khan, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's the guy. That's the guy. And also to Tier Keir. I'm afraid you're yesterday's men, because your ideas are going to lose in the long run, and the British people are seeing through your nonsense. Luca, thanks for coming on. We will have you again on, hopefully sooner rather than later. You're always great entertainment. And,
always a pleasure.
Good. So keep up the good work. People want to follow you. They can do it on x.com/amiable argument, all one word. And please do give Luca a follow on X at x.com/amiable argument. Do that now, folks, if you can, so you don't forget. Great stuff. We'll say good night.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Cheers. Fantastic. Luca is always the man for good content, thoughtful content, considered and wise content. And thank you to him. Follow him at x.com/amiable argument. Please do that and show support for a very sensible voice. And we need as many sensible voices as possible. Now, talking about sensible voices, there is going to be a pro-UK rally on the 7th of September. Now, that's a Saturday, in George Square in Glasgow. There is their pro-UK rally, Stand Together to Protect Our Country, George Square, 7th of September at 1 p.m. And that's organised by the inimitable Glasgow cabbie, and he does fantastic work on a whole range of very vital issues. And that's the pro-UK rally on the 7th of September. As it happens, 11 days later will be the 18th of September, which will be the 10th year anniversary of the independence referendum, or rather the membership of the UK referendum, which was, of course, won overwhelmingly by the pro-UK side. So that's timed fairly well. Okay. And there's going to be lots of other speakers at that. It's who will no doubt be speaking on a range of issues, including protecting our country from mass invasion across the channel. Okay, let's shift that banner. Folks, let's quickly do this. We had a street stall. On Saturday. Let's quickly run through the pictures there. Let's bring up the first one. We were out meeting the great British public in Argyle Street. There we are. We were out for several hours on Saturday. It was quite a blustery day. Lots of people at the stall. There we go. Lots of interest in our materials, which we give away for free. Our cards, books, magazines. Okay. And this was the 3rd of August. So we're very keen to remind people that the next day, Saturday the 4th, as some of our table team, fantastic. Thank you, lads and lassies who came along. We were very keen to remind people that the Sunday, the 4th, was the 110th anniversary of Britain's entry into World War I. And so that's why we were flying that Britain Remembers flag, which is very attractive with a massive poppy and the 4 flags there of the 4 parts of our United Kingdom. Okay. And there's another shot there with the flowers from the street flower pots, which are very attractive during the summer. The council puts very nice flowers right up Argyle Street, which really help to beautify it, and our flag beautifying it a bit more as well. Okay, so that was out on Saturday, and the card that we had, which is available, is this one: Is your home here? Defend it. It's a greeting card, is blank inside, and it is a recruiting poster from 1915 during World War I. And we're aiming to shift these. You can get these at our shop. The text there is the text at the bottom. So do get these from our shop at aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. There we are. Basically £1 a card, and we're selling a pack of 6 at our shop, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. Extremely interesting talking point. You can send this at Christmas, for birthdays, thank yous, or just simply to wish somebody the best of British. Okay. And also at our shop, since it's up there, we've got a wee book for the Union, the book that started it all. We've got on Amazon, we have got the one and only One Big Country. And let's bring up that. Simply search Amazon for One Big Country, or I think you can get it through. No, you have to go to amazon.co.uk, search for One Big Country, and you will get a copy of this book. It's only a tenner, folks, and it's a big book for the Union, Volume 1, the first in 5 projected volumes, the second one out at the end of this year. It's the top of the hour. We're going to be back next Wednesday. We hope to see you there. Thank you to everybody that's been watching tonight on YouTube and on Twitter. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button. Please retweet, repost us on X, and give us a follow on X as well. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.